Okay, today we're going to talk about sourdough, and particularly a very specific shaila. It came up recently. It came up because another hashgacha made an announcement about something to do with this, and that's what we're going to talk about. But I'm not by name and not what they said specifically, but we're going to talk about this question that they brought up. But in order to get started, I got to give you a fair amount of background just to get you understanding what's going on over here. Okay, the way you make bread is you take flour and water and you mix them together and you bake it and it becomes bread. But it's only going to rise or fluff up if it has yeast in it. Okay, so the yeast, what happens when you put when there's yeast in the flour and water is it converts some of the starch into gas, which is carbon dioxide and alcohol. It turns into gas. It also affects the structure of the protein, it's called the gluten, that's in the flour. And therefore, that gas that's being created gets trapped inside this gas being created, and the protein holds it in, so it fluffs up. It sort of, the gas is blowing up, so like a balloon is blowing up, getting bigger and bigger, and there's no place to go, and so it turns into it rises. Then when we bake it, those gases actually get out, but then it keeps that fluffy, bigger structure, which is what we think of as bread. Okay, nowadays, lots of people. You need yeast in order to make bread, so they buy yeast. They buy powdered yeast or wet yeast, they call it. What did you say?
Fresh.
Called fresh yeast, that's what it's called. I'll change my word up here. Okay, but before those existed, those are new, relatively new, but before those existed, people used natural yeast. Okay, and that is like this. There's yeast all over the place, in the air, wherever you want to, and if you mix flour and water together, eventually the yeast will do its trick, and the yeast in the air will get to that flour and water, and that's why if you leave flour and water mixed together, it becomes chametz. Okay, because the yeast that's in there, you don't have to put yeast in to make it chametz. It's the yeast that's in there. The yeast that's in the air will turn it into chametz. Okay, now, but that takes a long time. Okay, so if you want to make bread today, you don't want to sit around and wait for the yeast to get to it. It's going to take forever. It takes a long time for that to happen. So you buy powdered yeast. Okay, but there's other ways to do it. Okay, and the other way to do it is the way people did it till there was such a thing as powdered yeast was they used sourdough. Okay, what's sourdough? Is if I take flour and water, I told you, and you mix it together, eventually yeast will get into it and it will start to rise. It'll start to do what it does. If you leave it for long enough, and not way beyond what it needs to turn into bread, it will eventually, the yeast will build up in that thing to the point that there'll be so much yeast in there that this thing will become really sour, really awful tasting, smelling and tasting. It'll be just basically a bowl with a lot of concentrated yeast in it. And now, basically, you have yeast. Now you can take that and put it into your flour and water and you get your thing going. Okay? So to show you what that's like, I made my own. Started a few days ago. You could see here, you can see on the lines, if you could see where the line is, it actually was better this morning. You can see on the line, that's where it started, the flour and the water mixed together. But after this site started on Wednesday, okay, just flour and water. I followed the recipe, but it's just flour and water. That's all that's in there. I didn't follow all the finer details of what you're supposed to do, but it was literally just flour and water. And it sat in a warm place. It was covered. And if you put it closer to yourself, you'll see how awful it smells. Okay, it has a really awful smell to it.
Did it crack like on Hilchos Pesach? You look for cracks?
It's already bubbling. And it was doing better this morning because last night it was going to be cold overnight. I had left it outside where it was nice and warm. You have to leave it someplace warm. Last night it was going to be a little colder. I put it behind the cholent, the Friday cholent in my house. Put it next to the Friday cholent pot, which is what they used to do. Put it near in the warm place, and it really went to town. And it's very alive now. And now you take a piece of that and you put it into your flour and water, and now it'll basically you're putting yeast into it. That's what you're doing. Instead of taking it out of a package, you're making it yourself. Okay. And that's how you make, so this is how you would make an initial sourdough. You mix flour and water together, you let it sit for a nice amount of time in a nice warm place, and it turns itself into sourdough. Okay, into this initial sourdough. Now, once you have that, there's two ways to go with this. Okay, there are two different ways, again, not today, in the olden days, and the way people used to do it, people do it now also, the people used to do it, there's two different ways to go. Okay, traditional way was like this. You took this, and you put it into the flour and water, and you made your bread. Before you baked it, okay, once you had a nice dough, you took one piece off of that. Now that piece is not as concentrated as this. That's just a piece of dough with a drop of yeast in it because it's mixed it all together. You put that piece of dough on the side next to the oven next to the oven or wherever. Okay, you put it next to the oven or someplace else, and you let it sit till tomorrow or a couple of days from when you want to bake bread again. And now that thing the yeast will build up in it. But you're not starting from scratch. You're starting with some yeast in it already because you pulled it out of your dough. And you let it sit. So every day you take a little piece and you save for the next one. Okay, and then you keep this up. Every day you bake bread, or every couple days you want to bake bread, you bake bread. Before you bake it, take a piece off and put it on the side, and you let it sit there to become sourdough for the next time you want to bake.
The second generation, so to speak?
Yeah, keep going, and then every day you keep doing this. So you bake bread every day or every third day, you keep doing this, and you keep it forever. Once you make the original one, it now lasts forever because every day when you make bread, you put some on the side. Okay? Now, just as an aside, you run into problems, of course, when you come to Pesach. Because the Torah says you're not allowed to keep sa'ar. It's called sa'ar, sourdough. You're not allowed to keep sa'ar. Hagam that is not edible, you're not allowed to keep it on Pesach. So what they would do is, so when it came Pesach, you had to get rid of it. Now, if you're running this chain, every day is running on yesterday's, then you run out of it. So there's two things that people would do. Two things that people would do. One is they would buy bread from Goyim on the day after Pesach. Okay, so they don't have any sa'ar to make bread themselves. They would start a new batch of sa'ar the day after Pesach. It took a whole day till it was ready. So the first day after Pesach they bought it, and the price can speak. So you could eat pas palter on that day, even people who are makbid because it's not available to get pas Yisrael. You could eat pas palter. And the other choice was, they would or they would just get sa'ar from a guy and make their bread. They go to the baker and say, please give me some of your sa'ar, which it comes up in the din. We'll talk about it soon. They get some sa'ar from the guy and buy that. Okay, whether you're allowed to keep this over Pesach and sell to a guy is a shaila we're not going to talk about. It's a shaila of potential of hana because you want your sourdough to stay around over Pesach. Whether you're allowed to sell it to a guy, it's isur hana shaila, not for today. Okay, we talked about it some time ago. Okay. So that's the original way that people did it. That's the way people did it. Every day they take a piece from their dough and keep it for tomorrow. Okay. Then, in more recent times, there's a modified version of this came along, and that was like this. Once we have refrigeration, people would do is they would create this initial dough, and they would build it up. They wouldn't have enough just to make one batch of dough. They keep building it up. Okay. There's a whole methodology to doing this. Building up to the point that they have a nice amount of what they call a sourdough starter. Okay, they have this thing that's available, and they stick it in the fridge. When it goes to the fridge, it becomes dormant, and it would shrink back down to a smaller size. It gets dormant, but when they're ready to bake, a few hours before they're ready to bake, they take it out of the fridge. They refresh it. They add some more flour to it. They refresh it, and it's ready to go again. And they can take a piece from that. So they keep the starter available all the time. They're not taking from yesterday's dough. They take every day, every time they want to bake, they take a piece. Basically, they take a piece off of that to make their bread that they want to make from. Okay, that's called a starter. Now you can only really do it realistically for most people if you have refrigeration. That's because in refrigeration you can keep it dormant when you don't need it. You can have more than you need. You keep it dormant when you don't need it. When you want it, you pull it out, you let it wake up, and you warm it up, and you could start using it again. Okay, so that person is keeping sa'ar going all the time, and they call a sourdough starter. Okay, it's not really the sourdough they're going to use. They're going to get that. They're going to pull off a piece from that, add some more flour and water, and get it going, and then it will start off. They're going to use that for their dough. Now, to keep a sourdough starter alive, to keep it going, takes a lot of patience and love and care and details, and all kinds of people get very attached to them, and there's a lot of effort goes into that. And some people don't want to. Okay, they have enough kids or dogs, and they don't want to bother bring up another child called their sourdough starter. So they just say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. And what they do is, every time they're ready to bake, they just go to they ask someone else for it. Either they ask their friend, give me some of your sourdough starter, or they go to the bakery. Okay, and the bakery sells them sourdough starter. Okay, the bakery says, we'll pashka with it, we'll keep it going, and we'll give you out your sourdough starter. And every time you want to make challah for Shabbos, once a week you want to make challah for Shabbos, fine, come to us on Wednesday, we'll give you some sourdough starter, and you can make your challah. Okay, and that's the person who we're focusing on. Okay, the person went to the bakery gave them sourdough starter, and they took it home and they made challah with it. Okay, that's the person who we're focusing on. Does that person have to be marfish challah from what they made? Okay, now, I don't know why I missed this, but I wanted to show you. Anyway, just this is really not so relevant. It's going to be relevant for a little part of a shiloh, but there's just a way to test how live, just for the fun of it, how live your starter is that when you mix flour and water together, they sink in water, and once they're alive and they're active, they float. Okay, because they're fluffier. Okay, they're less. So I didn't even try this at home yet. So hopefully this is going to work. This is a live demonstration. So I put water here. Hopefully I won't get too dirty either. Ooh. Look at this. Yum. Oh, look at that. Okay. So it looks like it's halfway. Okay. Anyhow. It didn't do as well. Once I took it away from the warm oven, it didn't do as well. But it does seem to be quite alive still. Okay, it's floating. It's not sinking. Okay. I did not try that at home first, so... Okay. Okay, now, most people who would keep a sourdough starter at home, if you ran your own sourdough starter, the starter that you have will not have a shir challah. Shir challah. There's a minimum amount. If you don't have too much flour and water mixed together, you're not chayiv challah. So imagine if my starter was not this, but let's say my starter was 5 times this, okay? It wouldn't be a shir challah, but it would be more than enough for me to use at home. So I wouldn't have, there's no question for me that sourdough starter is not chayiv and challah because it didn't have a shir challah to it.
Would it add up, the concept of, less than a shir, but if you put so much of it in the freezer altogether, it's like in one container, would that add to it? That would be part of that cheshbon.
It would be, but how much starter am I going to keep at a time? Again, I have this container, so this is a small container. Let's say it was 5 times as big as this. It still wouldn't be a shir challah.
No, but say you're dealing with regular challah. You made a small batch.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make too many small batches and put them in the freezer at the
same time. If you made the challah out of it, right, now.
Right. But this would add...
Yes, it would add to it, yes.
Right.
So for a regular person, the starter usually won't have the shir challah. But for a bakery, of course it would. Think about a bakery who's selling to people. He's not going to have a little container like this. He's going to have a huge one. Okay, we saw one, surely. So the other, he has a huge one. Okay, it's a nice, a large sized one. And there's plenty of, we have to move along. It's going to take... It's a large amount of stuff, and it would be chayiv and challah. So the Mishnah says, there's a Mishnah that says is that a baker who makes dough to be for sa'ar, he wants to make it for sa'ar, he's chayiv and challah. Okay, we're going to come back to this Mishnah. For now, we're going to take that Mishnah at face value. The Mishnah says if you make mix flour and water to make sa'ar out of it, you're chayiv and nefashas challah. Okay, fine. Shulchan Aruch says a step further than that. He says, what happens if the baker was not mafresh challah, and I take a piece of his sa'ar and I put it into my dough that I make? So then, let's say I already was mafresh challah from my dough. I made 5 pounds of flour and I was mafresh challah, and then I said, oh my gosh, I forgot, I don't have any yeast, and I went to the baker and I put it into there. Now I'm chayiv to be mafresh challah from my dough, even though my dough already had a fresh challah. Why? Because sa'ar can't be batal. Sa'ar can't be batal, sourdough can't be batal, so I have to be mafresh challah from my dough, even though I was mafresh challah already from it. But now I've added stuff into it, I have to be mafresh challah again. Basically, again, I have to be mafresh challah for that was added in. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. The Ramah says another step further. He says, what happens if I put it into a batch that had less than a shir challah? Okay, I'm not making a big. I'm making 2 pounds of flour. So I'm taking his sa'ar, which is chayiv and challah. I put it into my batch, which has only 2 pounds in it. I also have to be mafresh challah. Because I'm not being mafresh challah because of my flour. I'm being mafresh challah because of the sa'ar that was mixed in. The sa'ar that's it's chayiv and challah, it can't be batal. I'm chayiv to be mafresh challah. So that sounds like exactly our case. I went to the bakery. I went and bought from them a piece of sourdough. I bring it to my house. Even if I have less than a shir challah, even if my flour has less than a shir challah, I have to be mafresh challah for the sa'ar that was added in. Okay, so this Ramah sounds exactly like the case that was described by this of Hashgacha, and sounds like you have to be mafresh challah. Okay, that's what it sounds like. Okay, it's a straight out din from this Ramah, but I don't think that in practice that's true. In fact, it says it in the Ramah. In fact, that's what the din is. But let's see if in practice that's the truth. Okay, and there's 2 reasons to potentially think why it's incorrect. The application is incorrect. Not that the Ramah is incorrect. The Ramah is correct. The application is incorrect. The first is when a bakery makes a batch of sourdough starter, and had a shir challah. And they go ahead and they sell pieces off to people. They also bake their own bread. That's what they're making it for. Okay, they're making it because they want to make sourdough challah, sourdough bread, or whatever they want to make out of it. Okay, when the baker makes it, he's going to use way more than a shir challah. He uses a tremendous amount of flour. Okay, he makes 50 pounds of flour. So when he makes the bread, he's going to be mafresh challah from that. Of course, he's going to be mafresh challah. It's a Jewish baker. He's going to be mafresh challah. So when he's mafresh challah from that, so now the sa'ar had a fresh challah to it. He was mafresh challah. He said, from this batch, whatever's in here, here's this piece, Harry's a challah, and he was mafresh challah. So the sa'ar, it's true. The Mishnah said that the sa'ar is chayv and challah. It's true, it is, but it had a fresh in the bakery. The baker was mafresh challah. He didn't make, in the case of the Mishnah, the baker made the batch to give out to people. He wasn't mafresh challah, but our baker is making it. He's using it for himself also. When he uses it for himself, he's going to be mafresh challah. When he's mafresh challah on his bed, it's going to be mafresh for the sourdough also. Okay, so that seemingly it happened. So maybe it's chayv and challah, but it had a fresh challah. So there's two reasons to disagree with that. Two reasons why you might think that's not correct. First is, well, maybe yes, maybe not. Maybe some funny thing happened that it didn't happen. Maybe he wasn't mafresh challah. Maybe he used up all his starter and he didn't make any of his own bread. I don't know. Think of some reason. Maybe somehow he wasn't mafresh challah. Maybe. And there's another reason. There's a Mordechai. The Mordechai says that if you do remember I told you the original way people did it. They would bake bread and they take a piece off and save it for tomorrow. And each day they would take off a piece and save it for the next day. The Mordechai says when you're mafresh challah from your main batch, you should specifically have in mind that I don't want to count the sa'ar that I took off. The sa'ar that I took off should not be included in this hafrashas challah. He says, why? Why would I tell you that? He says, because tomorrow you're going to look at a batch of flour. You're going to mix flour and water together. You're going to throw in some sa'ar from yesterday. Let's say what you have from today was just under the amount that's chayv in hafrashas challah. It's just under the amount. And now you add these pieces and say, and I have a shir challah. But you don't know that thing already had a fresh yesterday. So you're going to be confused. You'll think you're chayv and challah when you're really not chayv and challah. So in order to make it clear, you don't be mafresh challah each day when you take off this sar. Say, this sar I am not including in the freshest challah.
Is that a concern about the bracha or just?
It's concerned because you'll think you were mafresh challah and then you add flour later on, and that will be really chayv. You think you did it already. It'll lead to all kinds of confusion. So he says, have in mind you're specifically not being mafresh for the part that you separated for tomorrow. So now, if the bakery knows that, and the bakery, when they bake their bread, they say, I'm specifically having in mind that I'm not including the sa'ar that's left for somebody to sell, then there won't be hafrashas challah. Okay? So, that's what the Mordechai says, in which case the bakery wouldn't be doing it. So, that makes an assumption that nowadays people should do that also. The Mordechai is just giving you advice. It's hard for me to believe that. First of all, the bakers don't know that. Most bakers don't know about this Mordechai. But also is that that people buying from a bakery are going to think that the amount that they bought didn't have fresh challah. It's very hard to imagine. It's hard to believe that we should do this Mordechai, that we're benefiting people by following this Mordechai. But okay, let's say we did. So let's say we said, okay, no, the baker wasn't mafresh challah because he held like the Mordechai or some other kooky thing happened like that. But there's another way that fresh challah happens, and that is the baker is selling sourdough starter to all kinds of people. As soon as one of them is mafresh challah, one of those people goes home and bakes 5 pounds of flour, they're going to be mafresh challah for themselves. They don't know from chachmas. They take this dough and say, this is challah for everything that's in here. Well, that includes the sourdough that's back in the bakery still also. It includes everything. They were mafresh. They have sourdough starter. They made a batch of 5 pounds. They were mafresh challah. When they're mafresh challah, it's for everything. So it's automatically included this sa'ar that's back in the bakery also. Okay, so that's another reason why it connected. The same kind of idea. This is my first point, which is that let's say that the sa'ar is chayv and challah. What the baker made is chayv and challah. Let's say it's chayv and challah, but people are going to be mafresh. Either the baker is going to be mafresh, or some other person who bought the starter is going to be mafresh. So the chances that I have to be mafresh when I use less than a shir challah is almost non-existent. Someone's going to have a shir challah and they're going to be mafresh. So me, the guy who just made one little batch of dough, it's hard to believe that it's ever going to come.
So for the whole city, one resident does it, and it affects the whole city's challah?
And what happens at the bakery today?
No, it's coming from the same batch.
Coming from the same batch.
Yeah.
It's the same batch. What happens today? The baker makes 500 pounds of rye bread. He makes one hafrashas challah for all 500 pounds. He doesn't care. What's the difference? It's a big batch. So I spread this all around. Now, you could have in mind, I only want it for mine, not for his. But nobody's going to do that. If you went home and you baked 5 pounds of bread, you'd say, be mafresh challah for what's in here. And what's in here includes a piece from the main batch over there. But this is, I consider this, I think it's worthwhile, but I think this is the weaker argument. I think there's a stronger reason why you're not chayav nefashos challah. And that's because we're starting from the point of saying, the Mishnah said, if a baker makes dough in order to make so'or out of it, that's what our bakery is doing, then you're chayav nefashos challah. Okay? But to understand my question, I got to first tell you some details. Another set of halachas. And that is something that's called the Isa Hasui L'chalik. Okay? If you have dough that you plan to divide it up before you bake it, then the rules are different. What I mean is like this. We're going to work with the assumption that the shir challah is 2.5 pounds. Okay? Whether you make a bracha for that, not for today. Let's assume the shir challah, just we need to use a number for examples. The shir challah is 2.5 pounds of flour. What happens if I make a batch of dough that's 3 pounds of flour? Chayav challah. But I'm not going to bake that dough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give to three of my children, I'm going to give each of them 1 pound of dough, and they're going to take it home and bake it in their houses. Okay, I'm going to take each person's going to do their own thing. That's the plan. We do that every week. I give each one of them 1 pound. They take it home with them. Each one of them has less than the shir challah. So that's an isa hasui l'chalik yishu batzek. While it's dough, it's going to be divided up into a smaller than a shir challah. That is not chayav nefashos challah. Okay, even though when I mixed the flour and water, it was chayav nefashos challah. It had a shir challah, but since I gave it out as dough, and that each person's will not have a shir challah, I'm not mechuyev to be mafresh challah. Now, but there's a big exception to that rule. And the exception to that rule is if there's any way or there's any possibility that they may actually be baked together, or there'll be tzir of sal, they get brought together like you said before, and they have a tzir afterwards, they'll come together in a way that's chayav nefashos challah, that makes them into one shir again, then you are chayav. So for example, a bakery, when they bake bread for regular people, okay, maybe someone's going to buy 3 loaves, and make a tzir of sal, they'll have 3 together. The baker himself is going to put into a display case that we're going to have a tzir of sal. Even though he plans to divide them to many people, but there's going to be a tzir of sal, there's going to be a tzir at some other point.
If the parents give it out to the kids bake challah, they're coming, both sides are coming to the parents for Shabbos meal.
That's true. So if that's a possibility that might happen, then yes, then they'd be chayav challah. It's not a shuri l'chalik because it's possible that it's going to come back together. There will be a tzir of sal after it gets baked. Okay, so this is the reason why the Mishnah says like this. Mishnah says, the same Mishnah that I told you about beforehand says like this. If there are a bunch of people who come to the baker and they say, we would like to each give you 2 cups of flour, and you to take all these cups of flour together, make us sourdough. We want a sourdough starter. We don't want to make it. We can each give you 2 cups of flour. Between 10 people together, we'll all give you, now you have 20 cups of flour. Make us a batch of sourdough for us. Okay? So each person didn't have a shir challah, and each person's going to get their part back. And if 10 people gave it in, when we finish, each person's going to get 1/10 and they're going to take it home with them. So the Mishnah says, they're not chayav nefashos challah. No chayav nefashos challah, because it's a soy l'chalik. I gave in my 2 cups of flour, I'm going to get back 1/10 of the batch. It's not chayav nefashos challah. Fine. So the Yerushalmi says, wait a second. That doesn't make sense. The other part of the Mishnah said the almost exact same case. If a baker, I told you this before, this is the same Mishnah. If a baker makes a dough and he plans to sell it to people, then the Mishnah says is he's chayav nefashos challah. So what's the difference? What's the difference if the ladies give the flour to the baker and then you're not chayav nefashos challah, or if the baker makes it by himself to sell it to people, then you're chayav nefashos challah? That's Yerushalmi's question. It's the same Mishnah. One is chayav challah because one is not chayav because it's asur l'chalik, and one is chayav. What's the difference?
Is there a kinyan someplace?
Is there a kinyan someplace? What do you mean?
They give the flour to the baker. Is the baker koneh?
Let's say he is. Let's say he is or is not. What's the?
Then it would make it like the other case.
The other case, when the baker makes it himself, he's chayav and nefashos challah. Mm-hmm. When the people in town give it to the baker, so why is that different? Why now he's patur from nefashos challah?
But once he acquires it, it's like the case where.
So why does the Mishnah say that the other case is it's patur? Okay, that's the Yerushalmi's question. Okay, we don't have to be smart on Yerushalmi. Yerushalmi asked that question. Yerushalmi says the difference is like this. When the people come to the baker with their own flour, then there's no question what's going to happen. when he finishes making sourdough, they're each going to take their part back. It will for sure be lachalik. For sure that these people, that this bread is never coming back together. Each person is taking 1/10 of the dough, and it's going to be permanently separated. Okay, again, I gave him my 2 cups. I want my 10th back when it's over. When a baker makes a batch to sell as sa'ar, he doesn't know if he's going to have any customers. It could be no one's going to show up to buy this sa'ar. Well, what's going to happen if no one shows up? If no one shows up, he's going to bake it himself. He'll turn it into a loaf. I'll tell you in a second what that means. He's going to bake it himself. He might make it into something that is not lachalik. So since there's a possibility, I told you there's an exception. If there's a possibility that it won't be lachalik, then it's chayv on farshas chal. Okay, so when the baker makes it of his own, he doesn't know if anyone's going to show up, any customers will come. In Cain, it might end up that it won't be lachalik. He's chayv on farshas chal. By the people who gave him the flour, like when they gave him the flour, it's obvious he has his customers. They're going to come back tomorrow to pick up their sourdough. So then it's asur lachalik. Okay, so I'm going to skip some of the details over here, but Reb Chaim Kanievsky says like this. He says, if sa'ar is not edible, like we saw here, it's a Gemara, and it's taka. In fact, you could smell it. It still smells awful. Sorry, it still smells awful. Okay, it's really awful. It's not edible. So he says something that's not edible. At this point, there's no way that you could bake this into bread. You can't bake this thing as it stands today into bread. So he says once it comes to the point that it is sa'ar already, once it's already sa'ar, he says it's not chayv on farshas. Then at that point, there's no possibility that someone now would take that and bake that into bread. You can't bake that into bread. I mean, you can bake it; it won't taste like it. You won't be able to eat it. Okay? You can't bake that into bread. He says when the Mishnah says that it's chayv and challah is because you made he's metayik in the words in the Mishnah is, or the way the Ram says is nachtem she'asa isa la'asoisa sa'ar. He made dough that he plans to turn into sa'ar. So what happens is, let's say on Sunday morning he makes this dough, hoping that someone's going to buy the sa'ar. By the afternoon he realizes nobody wants my sa'ar. At that point, before it really sours and becomes totally sourdough, he realizes, hey, no one's coming in to buy my stuff. He'll quickly bake it before it becomes sour. At that point, he might bake it when he realizes that he's not having any customers, and at that point, it will not be asur l'chalik because he'll bake it into loaves that one person might end up eating. But if it actually turned into sa'ar, if it actually became to the point that it became actual starter, okay, the whole thing became sa'ar, at that point, there's no possibility of selling it, of turning into bread anymore, and you're not chayv on farshas. It's not considered asur l'chalik. It is asur l'chalik, and it's not chayv on farshas chal. Okay, I'm skipping pieces over here. It's not so pashut what he said. Okay, I'm just putting that on the side. But the point is correct, which point is that and this is what we need to do. I'm skipping parts here. I'm sorry, just because we're running low on time. The point is like this: it's only considered asur l'chalik. It's only considered asur l'chalik if there's a real possibility that you could bake it. So what Reb Chaim Kanievsky said? He says if it already turned into sa'ar, if not, there's no way to bake it anymore. Okay, so that's the difference between sa'ar of the Mishnah and the sa'ar in our bakery. Okay, in our bakery, they don't have a dough that they pull off a piece to make sa'ar out of it. The dough in our bakery is 100% sourdough. Okay, it's not something that anybody could eat right now. Not only that, if you said to the baker, "Would you ever bake this? Is it possible? Is there any possibility that you're going to bake this?" The answer is 100% no. So someone said to me, no, but the baker said I could. I once took a piece off and I tried it and I could do it. I said, yeah, you could try it. You could everything's theoretically possible. But in practice, no. The baker is not. In fact, the people who make sourdough have whole ideas of what you do when you have to. There are times in the processing and the babying of your sourdough that you have to discard some. Okay, you have to actually throw it in the garbage in order to keep it going. And there's a whole chachmas of what do you do with the discard? Okay, what can you do with that stuff before you throw it out? But there isn't a chance in the world that the baker is going to bake it. So even though our Nachman made the sa'ar by himself, it sounds like the second case of the Mishnah where the Nachman made it by himself and he plans to sell it to people, and Yerushalmi says, well, maybe no one's going to buy it and he's going to bake it. Okay, that's true for him. That's true for the way they did it. The way we make our bakers are doing it, there isn't a chance in the world that he's going to bake it. And the Mela, it's really the first case of the Mishnah. The first case of the Mishnah, which is people came to him and said to him, we want you to make sa'ar for us, and there's no chance that he will bake it all together. It's for sure asur l'chalik. That's what he did. He made this sa'ar in order l'chalik. That's what he made it for. And is there a chance that he's going to bake it himself? Zero. There's no chance he's going to bake it himself. So I don't think that it's chayav l'chala. Okay, I don't think that the thing is chayav l'chala. Now so Hagan that the Mishnah says it is, but the Mishnah has two cases. And even though our case sounds like the case where the Mishnah says it's chayav, in truth, I think it's like the case that where the Mishnah says you're potter, and therefore you're not chayav on farshas chal. Now there's a long footnote here about is it asur l'chal? Is there a way that it can have its sirus al later on? I don't believe it can. But excuse me. So again, let me just summarize everything I said, and that is the din says if a baker makes sa'ar and he sells it, gives it to people. If they mix it into their dough, they have to be mafresh challah, even if their dough does not have shir challah to it. Okay, that's what they say. So the two questions on that are: first is that seemingly there was a hafrashas challah. Let's say it's chayiv. Seemingly there was a hafrasha either in the bakery or someone in their house made a hafrasha for this. So even if there was a chiv hafrashas challah, that chiv has been taken care of. That's one point. And what I think is a stronger point is that there's really two cases in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah makes the point of saying. This thing is only true if it's not asur l'chalik. If we're confident that this will never have a tziruf, it will for sure be sold in separate people, and there will definitely never be a time when it comes back together to have a tziruf, then the Mishnah says itself, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, but the Mishnah says itself that the thing is not chayav on farshas challah. And our case of a bakery, a modern bakery with starter and the whole way everything runs, is exactly that case, that it's not chayav on farshas challah at all.